All right, well, it is noon, so we are going to go ahead and get started. We want to be respectful of everyone's time today. I know that we had a really great crowd of folks who were interested in our Lunch and Learn this afternoon with Great Southern Bank, and so I expect that we will have more people joining us here over the next couple of minutes and making their way into the session, but for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. And so I want to welcome everyone and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Paige Oxendine, and I'm the program coordinator here at the efactory, if we haven't yet had the opportunity to meet, located in downtown Springfield, and really excited to have you all with us for our Lunch and Learn this afternoon with Great Southern Bank. Great Southern Bank has been a long-standing partner of the efactory. We're so thankful for their support, everything they do to assist not only us as an entrepreneurship and innovation center here in Southwest Missouri, but also to assist our small business clients and entrepreneurs. And we know that they're really committed to fostering that growth here in our region. And so we're actually super excited to have 3 experts from Great Southern Bank with us this afternoon to talk about the future of finance, which is a really exciting topic. And we know that there are so many changes happening really in every industry, especially right now in response to COVID-19, but excited for the opportunity to talk about more specifically what the future of the financial industry is going to look like. And we've got just the people here to share their insights with us today. Before we get started, I did want to share a couple of housekeeping items. And so if you are a participant today, you will see that you are muted upon entry into the Zoom event. And so we would ask you to remain muted if at all possible. That'll make sure that we can hear our 3 panelists really nice and clearly and make sure that we can hear everything they have to share with us this afternoon. If at any point, anything that I say or anything that one of our panelists says sparks a question or a thought, I would really encourage you to drop that in the chat feature this afternoon. And so as you think of things, feel free to write in the chat, to interact in the chat, and then as we move through the program, we'll have an opportunity at the end to answer those questions and see what you all have to say so we can have some interaction that way. So don't be shy, use the chat feature, and we'll definitely get to those at the end. But let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we need to do this afternoon is introduce our experts. Like I said, we have 3 experts from Great Southern Bank who are going to be sharing their insights into the future of finance with us. So the first is Christine Frederick, who's the Managing Director of IT Operations and Enterprise Projects. Thanks for waving, Christine. We've also got Kent Lammers, who's the Managing Director of Business Banking. And we have Mark Maples, the VP Managing Director of BSA and Loss Prevention. And so a really great lineup today. Make sure that you're thinking of those hard questions. We were joking earlier that we've got the people with us today who can answer those hard questions and share their insights with you. So make sure you're thinking about those and putting those in the chat. But I do want to go ahead and get started. And so obviously there's a lot to talk about if you wanted to talk about the future of an industry and particularly the future of finance. But the first thing that we're going to talk about in regards to that today is around technology and innovation in particular. And so Christine is going to kick this off for us. And I know she has a lot of great information to share, technology and innovation, things that are changing in the financial world, some of which is, specifically in response to COVID-19, but also some technologies and some changes that really were, I would say, in the pipeline prior to the pandemic. And so I'm going to turn it over to Christine to share some of that with you this afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, thank you guys all for being here. I'm excited to share with you, this year has been a big year for a lot of us. We've seen a lot of challenges with COVID and just, with adjusting our staff and adjusting to meet the needs of our customers. We've even seen a large shift in clients and the types of services that they use. I know on the banking side, we've seen a push towards digital channels, customers wanting to be able to make deposits mobilely or using, small scale remote deposit where before they preferred to use banking center channels. That shift is even happening across multiple generations, which is interesting. I think sometimes there's a stereotype that, our older generations don't want to mess around with technology, but, they're our most homebound generation right now. And a lot of them are really jumping on board and trying to, get their arms around that technology and how they can utilize that to stay home and stay safe in kind of these strange times. So We've been leveraging a lot of tried and true technology to stay connected with our customers right now. Meeting with clients on video conference when normally they would come and meet with us in person in a banking center is becoming a lot more commonplace. We used to interact with customers in person in our banking centers, and a lot of people are displaced. I've talked with customers that are out of the country and, stuck in France or other locations that can't travel right now with the pandemic. So it's been really interesting to see that shift in just how we interact with our customers in general. I know Great Southern during the stay-at-home orders, we turned our drive-up locations into full-service banking centers. That allowed us to continue to meet the needs of our customers in a way that was still contactless, but gave them that personal relationship, that they're used to getting at the brick and mortar facilities. But I do think, for a lot of our customers and probably a lot of yours, the way that banking looks and the way that we do business just doesn't look the same anymore. I think it'll be really interesting to see after COVID is behind us, hopefully soon, what that looks like if we're going to continue operating as we are now, if customers are just used to it and prefer kind of that more contactless model of doing business with us. But it is very interesting, and it's really helped us develop relationships differently with our customers. Some of the ways that we've been able to respond to COVID during this time outside of, converting our drive-up locations to be more full service is, we even with EIP payments have, had to kind of look at how we post transactions and things for customers and, how we can make sure that customers aren't being inconvenienced in these really strange times. We got thousands and thousands of stimulus payments in, and, normally those are automated in how they're posted and how they're returned, and we had kind of a task force here that even looked at those and, tried to make decisions of, okay, how can we make sure customers get this money in their hands when normally we would send funds back, if an account is closed and things like that. So it's very interesting to just see how our business customers are adjusting to this as well. And, a lot of them doing contactless pickup and, drive up and pick up your boutique order in the in the driveway kind of thing instead of coming into location. So it's been interesting to see that shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I know we likely have some personal banking customers on the call with us today. And then I imagine some, business and small business banking customers with us on the call today as well. And so are there any specific, new technologies or innovations that, myself as a personal banking customer, or maybe a small business banking customer, you would expect us to start seeing here in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think one of the large shifts that the industry is making is just towards real-time payments. There are a lot of different channels out there that give customers a real-time experience. If you think like Zelle or person-to-person payments where people think they're getting paid in real time, but that settlement is still taking, 2 or 3 days on the back end to take place. FedNow is one of the services that's kind of up and coming right now. They're developing a 24/7, 365 settlement rail where you can send or request funds in real time and that settlement occurs immediately. It's a great time, for us as a bank and for you guys as business owners to just think about how you can migrate into that real time space. It doesn't just meet the needs of your customers, but in a lot of ways it could also meet needs that you have at your business too, to get paid in real time and not have that risk, of a clawback or how long it takes for funds to settle and for you to know that they're really collected and, and spendable. Voice payments and chatbot services are another area that we're seeing a lot of development in, Alexa Pay and people just being able to really, speak into their phone and make a loan payment or get balances, transfer funds and things like that. So a lot of those technologies are really up and coming as well.
Yeah, that's cool. I know that I use some of those apps and features that you're talking about as well. And so people are always really excited to hear about what the next new, shiny thing is that's going to be coming their way soon. And I know something we've spoken about previously is, so Great Southern as a business, and I know other businesses have to work through these identifications as well. So, customers are always excited about innovations and they're excited about something new. But tell me a little bit about, how do you all determine which of these innovations truly provide value to the banking customer and how that's a fit then within your business model? Like I said, businesses may hear from customers, oh, I want this new thing, but the business also has to identify, does that innovation provide value at the end of the day?
Yeah, our customers are constantly giving us feedback and asking questions or telling us what their needs are. And there's a lot of, shiny new technology out there. Some of it is so new that kind of the security framework hasn't been developed, or the impact on banking regulations and, customer protection hasn't really been developed. And I think for us, we want to make sure we're not rolling out new products just because they're shiny, but because they're going to actually meet a need, or they're going to answer a question that a customer has. We have tried and true services like Positive Pay that help customers manage transactions and, make sure that what's coming through their account is legitimate and, is a transaction that they authorize. We have tried and true payment channels like ACH and wires that allow customers to streamline payments. Things like card controls bring value to customers because they can turn off their cards when they're not in use and turn them back on, when they're needing to do a transaction. But even little things like, text banking services when people are on the go and they don't want to have to log into their mobile app to check balances or to do, small transactions like transfers. There's a lot of different technology out there to meet various needs that customers have. I do think, a lot of customers are still going to prefer that human touch. And so we're trying to leverage how we can give customers new technology that's useful to them, but also use that technology to help them stay connected with their banker, whether that's, through text message, through chat features and things like that. So I would say, those are some of the up and coming things that I think you'll expect to see, especially with what we've gone through this year with COVID, is trying to figure out how to stay connected to your customers and continue that personal relationship while you're still meeting that technology need.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I love what you shared kind of at the beginning of the answer there about, innovations and new products and new programs are great, but sometimes do come with an increased risk that needs to be evaluated. And so that's actually, we're going to shift gears here and move on to our next topic, which is risk and protection. And I know Mark Maples is going to take the lead here, but Christine and Kent, if you have anything you want to add, feel free to hop in. And so Mark, what are you seeing in the fraud space right now, whether that's specifically, in response to COVID-19 or otherwise? Tell us a little bit about, what you're seeing, these changes that we're seeing in the financial industry do potentially open us up to risk and fraud. And so let's chat a little bit about risk and protection and what you're seeing in that space.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paige. And first of all, my apologies. I'm apparently video challenged today. That's probably not a bad thing, though, since this is over the lunch hour. So not looking at my face is probably not a bad thing for everybody. But speaking specifically to fraud, it is true that we have seen elevated levels, not only Great Southern Bank, but the entire industry, elevated levels of fraudulent activity and attempts triggered by the pandemic. Unfortunately, fraudsters, I think, subscribe to the motto, never let a good crisis go to waste. And as a result, they've pivoted to the pandemic and are attempting to take advantage of individuals and businesses to a very large degree. We've attempted to mitigate that somewhat by having, as Christine mentioned, certain levels of oversight from transaction monitoring on this end, but also trying to reach out from an educational standpoint to assist our customers to give them the knowledge and the resources to be able to protect themselves. I would like to go ahead and speak, though, to the fact that, especially given our target audience, small business owners, while it's true that there will always be external threats, in my mind, internal malfeasance and embezzlement certainly rivals external fraud threats. To me, this is kind of like the blocking and tackling of small business ownership, just making sure that you have your house in order, making sure that you're taking steps to protect against internal malfeasance, embezzlement. Many times, such events are crimes of opportunity that are typically committed by a very trusted individual who maybe they have an issue with their personal finances and they're placed in a very difficult position and they don't feel they have any other option. They rationalize and they will attempt to go ahead then and take advantage of any weak controls that you may have in your business. And that can range from, making or an absence of segregation of duties, strong internal controls, dual controls, things such as, for example, making sure the same person who writes checks or initiates online bill payment or initiates ACH files, they don't also balance the monthly statement, things of that nature. You don't want to have one individual who has the ability to perform a number of tasks with limited amount of oversight. And unfortunately, we see in these situations, as I mentioned before, typically there's one individual who has been with the company for a long time, and because of their past performance and their level of trustworthiness, they're given a lot of latitude, and as a result, unfortunately, many times that individual will take advantage of that trust. So just a few suggestions that I would have would be to make sure, again, that you segregate duties. I can't stress that enough. I know that small businesses have limited resources, and you have to wear a lot of hats. But we've seen, not only with some of our customers, unfortunately, but also throughout the industry, there are a number of situations where an individual will look to exploit that level of trust and the ability to go ahead and perform transactions, balance, perform reconciliation, things of that nature, without having somebody else checking them. So segregate duties, segregate duties, segregate duties. Implement dual control on all functions deemed materially significant. Utilize pre-employment screening. You know, you want to make sure you have the right people on the bus, but sometimes there are certain individuals you don't want to get on the bus in the first place. And this is a pretty low threshold for just making sure if you're going to fill a position or add a position, just do some background screening. Look for past criminal activity or criminal records. Also, I would recommend looking out for certain red flags. And these red flags don't necessarily indicate that embezzlement is taking place or an individual is prone towards taking advantage of controls, but in many cases, these are red flags that possibly something like that is underway. Again, one employee responsible for multiple tasks. An individual appears to be living beyond their means. An individual never takes time off or goes on vacation. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily an individual with a very strong work ethic. They may be trying to cover their own tracks, and if they're away from the office, they're unable to go ahead and cover that and perpetuate the scheme. So be alert to that. Be alert to any questionable or excessive adjustments with your bank statement. Look for possible billing and payment complaints with your accounts payable, accounts receivable group. Again, the same person who's writing checks is an authorized signer. Look for trends involving shortages in petty cash. If non-payroll checks have been issued to employees, payments are made to unusual vendors or for unusual amounts. We've seen cases where individuals will go ahead and create a fictitious company and will begin initiating payments to that company, which actually they're controlling. We've even seen situations where the individual would go ahead and go to the extent of registering a fictitious business with the state and opening an account then with another financial institution in the name of that fictitious business, and then transferring funds to that business, oftentimes to accounts payable, or duplicate or overstated payments to vendors. Those are just a few things to go ahead and keep the forefront of your mind.
Yeah, that's a great point. You do make such a great point that oftentimes when we think of fraud, I think we think of, hackers who are behind a computer screen, potentially even in a different country. But oftentimes there is, greater or, equal or greater risk inside our own walls, unfortunately. And so great tips to provide there. I know I've seen some mention in the news, and I wonder if you could speak to this about trends that you're seeing in the fraud space, specifically around maybe certain demographics of folks that are being targeted, whether that's elderly members of our population. Are they at a higher risk? Are they targeted more? Or even recently, businesses that have received SBA, COVID relief funds. Obviously, a lot of that information is out there. And are those businesses at a greater risk?
Absolutely. A great question, Paige. Yes, unfortunately. Senior citizens are particularly targeted in many cases because they have resources. I mean, they've worked their entire life. They have assets, and they're very trusting generally. And they make for a very enticing target by fraudsters. Lots of times that will be manifested through romance schemes primarily. Individuals will go ahead and these fraudsters are insidious. They really are. They'll go ahead and monitor obituaries. They'll look for individuals who have recently lost a spouse. And then they'll go ahead and make connection with that individual, usually oftentimes via social media. And they will string that individual along for a period of time, building up a certain level of trust before they then attempt to monetize the relationship. And that will always take place at some point. It could be as soon as just a couple of months. We've seen some situations in which they string the victim along for a couple of years before they then attempt to go ahead and monetize the relationship. Work from home scams are always prevalent. And actually, that was a method through which you had mentioned, Paige, an increase in COVID-related scams, especially specific to the SBA and the PPP program. Fraudsters have gotten very good at gaining access to these funds, but in order for them to ultimately go ahead and launder the funds and get to a point where they can go ahead and access them, they'll attempt to launder it by going through multiple levels, by soliciting individuals primarily with work from home scams. And those individuals will then be, whether it's a secret shopper scam or a customer service type scam, they'll be asked to go ahead and receive an inbound ACH credit. And the victim thinks, well, it's got to be legit if I'm getting money. I'm not being asked to send money, but I'm receiving funds. But then they'll be asked to turn around and forward it on to another individual. And there's always a cover story, but it's just one step in the process of laundering the funds and trying to cover the fraudster's tracks to get to an ultimate destination through which they can then access those funds. And we've seen a large increase in those. I would really like to also really quickly mention to this group, one thing to really be on the lookout for is the business email compromise scheme. This has been in effect pre-pandemic. It's been in effect for probably the last 4 or 5 years, but fraudsters have gotten very good about this. Oftentimes they'll go ahead and compromise an individual's email server, and they'll just monitor email traffic. They'll get to by monitoring the traffic, they'll be able to go ahead and determine who the decision maker is in the organization. They'll be able to pick up syntax usage, and at a certain point, once they've obtained all that information, they'll then initiate an email. And because they've compromised the email server, the inbound email will have the appropriate email format. But they'll then portray themselves as that individual and ask them to go ahead and either wire funds or cut a check and mail a check, typically for a large dollar amount. And because they know the sentence structure and the syntax this person uses, it's really effective. Or they'll go ahead, and if there's an existing vendor that you're sending wires to, they'll go ahead and contact the individual that's initiating wires and tell them that they've had to change payment information. They'll portray themselves as the vendor, and they've had to change payment or wire instructions. And so the individual is initiating a wire, but they're initiating it to the fraudster as opposed to the actual vendor. So never go ahead and just take an emailed request to modify payment instructions. Always call and do a voice recognition with the individual whom you do business with before you modify payment instructions.
Yeah, that is a great tip. You know, we all live so much on email that if you receive an email request to do something, it's oftentimes we immediately turn around and take said action. And so thank you for sharing that. I have one last question around risk and fraud, which touches on liability. And so share briefly with us, what would my liability look like as a business owner, if and when I experience fraud, just making sure folks understand the situations in which they might be liable.
Great question. Yeah, I can't stress this enough. Your relationship with your financial institution is so important, and monitoring your accounts is equally important, not just weekly or monthly. Please monitor your accounts daily, especially now. I think it's a good business practice, but especially now. Look for any unauthorized activity and make sure you immediately report any unauthorized activity to your financial institution. You have, based upon the depository agreement with your financial institution, you have a certain amount of time to notify the bank. And right now I'm talking specifically about check or MICR-based fraud, but a certain amount of time to notify your bank of any unauthorized activity. Possibly your account's been compromised. And if you notify them outside of that time frame, under the Uniform Commercial Code, you are responsible for the full amount of liability, and the bank bears no responsibility. Even if you do report it within the appropriate time frame, banks will typically then go ahead, as part of their investigation, they will review who is in the best position to go ahead and catch and prevent the fraud. And by doing so, to establish responsibility, and that may impact the amount your bank is able to go ahead and provide restitution to you. And that goes back to the internal controls topic that we were discussing. Make sure that you don't give one person single control of all functions, because if you have a weakness with internal controls, it may put you in a position where that you would not be able to receive full restitution from your financial institution.
Okay, great information. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Another aspect of the financial world that we know is constantly evolving is the lending landscape. And so we're going to move here to Kent, but of course, Christine, Mark, if you have anything, feel free to jump here in here and talk a little bit about lending. And so Kent, if you could share with me, first of all, what does business lending look like during a pandemic? And then as we navigate beyond COVID, what changes are you anticipating?
Sure. Well, one question we get quite frequently is are banks and credit unions and financial institutions, are they still lending? And I have not spoken to any colleague at other institutions where they say, no, we've stopped. Are there certain types of industries that they are a little more hesitant to lend to and they're going to do a deeper investigation into? Certainly. But everyone, all the banks that I've spoken to are still active and still, went into the pandemic with far more capital than what we had during the last downturn. So yeah, there's still dollars out there looking for quality products and businesses to lend to. During the pandemic, we probably adopted some newer ways of looking at things that I think are going to be a long-term part of how we look at things. We've always done a pretty deep dive on looking at your cash flow, leverage, all kind of those kind of standard ratios that you hear a lot about. But we've moved beyond that to a certain extent, and we're going into more of a shocking scenario, and that's kind of bankerese for how big of a hit could this business take and still cover operations and still cover debt? In other words, if you were, a restaurant and your sales got cut by 50%, what does that do to your bottom line? How many of your expenses are truly variable and how many of them are fixed? What does that look like? And how can you navigate, a situation like that? So we're definitely looking more at a shocked scenario. And then as far as going further with it is when the pandemic first hit, the big question was, what is COVID doing to your business? It was a very kind of reactionary type approach. Now we've seen that kind of philosophy turn, and it's more of, what are you doing in reaction to the COVID pandemic? And so how are you being more proactive and less reactive to adjust your business and to make sure you can still function successfully? Questions that that we're asking our customers are their current customers still buying their products or services? And if so, how are they buying? If you're a restaurant, did you pivot to a lot of curbside delivery? Did you switch to Grubhub? How have you evolved your business? Another challenge is vendors. Lumber has been in short supply around Southwest Missouri, and the price of lumber has gone up a lot. What does that look like for you and your business if that is impactful? And basically, those types of questions are the same questions that Great Southern is asking itself. How are our customers still buying and consuming our products? How are our vendors still able to supply the items we need to be able to furnish to our customers? So it's a very similar analysis on a high level. It's just, and then you just need to apply it to your individual business and your suppliers. Now and in the near term, I think cash reserves are going to be a big factor. That's all part of that shocking scenario. How long can you survive a downturn? And looking at a combination of um, the your adjusted cash flow if there is if the downturn continues, and what are your cash reserves to help ride that out, as well as cash reserves for potential opportunistic uh, uh, situations that may arise. You may have a chance that, hey, my competitor did not go into this downturn as well positioned as I did, and now I'm able to maybe make an offer for that person's book of business. We are seeing that. We helped somebody acquire a landscaping business, and basically that individual doubled their landscaping business during a pandemic, and it's been a great opportunity for that particular company. And then definitely going forward, maybe during an expansion and when times are great, this isn't as important. But I would say longevity of relationship for all financial institutions is going to be absolutely huge. If you don't have a bank or credit union relationship, now would be a good time to start one. It doesn't always have to revolve around loans. That's what I do, but I also help on the deposit side. I help with if somebody needs credit card processing, my team participates in all those things to try to establish a complete relationship. And that is going to be huge, I think, on a go forward basis. Again, if you can say, hey, I've banked at wherever for 5 years, and I lasted throughout the pandemic, and there was no problems with my checking account, there was no problems with my loan, none of that. That's all going to be huge. But to also harken back to some previous topics, if we understand and know your relationship, then we're going to know better what products and services when they come up. When we decide to add a new product or service, hey, I need to talk to this business person about this particular product or service because I really think it could be impactful. If we don't know your business, if we're not familiar with you, that type of targeted quality product offering that could move your business or personal finances forward, it's much more challenging for us to do. And then to harken back what Mark is saying as far as fraud goes, when we were in the middle of deploying the Paycheck Protection Loan Program, within 3 days of that portal being opened, we started getting fraudulent hacked emails, and they weren't as sophisticated as what Mark was referring to, but it was very jarring. And we looked at it and said, wait a minute, this does not sound like our customer. Because we knew that customer, we were able to put the locks down and get it reported and notify the customer their email had been hacked, which only prevents further challenges for them going forward. So again, knowing your banker and your banker knowing you or credit union officer is going to be tremendous on a go forward basis.
Yeah, great point. And I think that's so true, of course, as it relates to your finances, but really true across so many aspects of our lives, that those relationships with trusted advisors are so key and help make everything possible down the road. So I know lots of people on the call today are likely existing business owners, and they have probably been through the process at one point of sitting down with a lender and talking about a business loan and receiving a business loan, and they might know the ins and outs of that. But can you share with me, I know we've also got folks on the call who haven't yet been through that process, and that might be something that they're looking to do. And so if I'm a business customer ready to apply for a loan, for the first time, what specifically should I be expecting, prepared to provide to you, especially, post-pandemic as we all move through this?
Sure. Well, I would say that probably, and I'll go through some of the kind of more checkbox stuff here, but I would say the first and foremost you should expect is a lot of narrative questions. I mean, yes, we're going to get to the numbers eventually, but the questions are going to be, again, coming back to how have you adjusted your business for the pandemic? What opportunities are you seeing? What challenges are you seeing? Customer, vendor related challenges, any of those types of things. There'll be an in-depth discussion about that for sure. Also, from a more the financial standpoint, we're going to be looking for 3 years of your personal and business tax returns. If your business has not been established for 3 years, that's okay. We're going to be looking for the most up to date we can get. Year to date numbers are going to be tremendous because, we're going to want to say, okay, in 2019, your business did X in sales with Y in expenses. Okay, now we're into 2020. So we've had, several months of COVID impact. What do your numbers look like now? And again, that's all part of a discussion. It shouldn't be, I'm going to email you all these items or send you a link to all these items, and then I just sit down and put in some magic formula and I pop out approved or not. Because the discussion is going to revolve around, okay, it looks like your sales maybe have gone down. Some customers we're seeing sales are going up. So I don't want to be, all doom and gloom about this. But if your sales have went down, then the discussion is have you been able to find wiggle room with some of your expenses? What are you doing to start to grow that top line back up? Oh, I've switched to a lot of curbside delivery. And if you look, my September numbers show a nice, 10% increase over what I was doing in August. And that's, so it's the combining of, yes, we're going to need those financials, but equally, if not more important, we're going to need the conversation that revolves and should be started by looking at those financials. Other items we'll need is a personal financial statement. That's kind of our version of a loan application, who you are, what are your assets, what are your liabilities, projections. Those are going to be tremendous too, just on a go forward basis. So we can look and see how adjustments have been made with COVID and to see what type of expense control perhaps you've put in place, or, hey, I've had a 30% growth because I'm in the deck business, and there's been a ton of people building decks now lately. So I'm projecting another, 10% increase by the end of the year. Great, let's talk about it. Let's figure that out. And so that's a big thing, and being able to have those up-to-date financial statements, because we're going to want to lay side by side, hey, how have you adjusted and how do things look differently for you and your business? From a product availability standpoint, the products that are available out there, that were available 8 to 10 months ago, they're still available. There's still a lot of SBA lending products out there. A lot of banks, Great Southern included, have made a even bigger commitment the last few years to doing more SBA loans. So there's a lot of expertise throughout the financial community on doing those. Of course, there's, there may be another round of Paycheck Protection funding. I don't know. There's been several discussions in Washington about that. We'll see if that comes about or not. That could be very exciting. There's revolving lines of credit, so as you have needs to acquire raw goods to convert it into a product, you can get a revolving line of credit. Of course, we are seeing a lot of equipment financing right now. Construction equipment financing, with construction being deemed a essential business. That's been big. Still, obviously, some technology equipment has also been huge right now, and of course, real estate financing has still been big. And if you're not ready to kind of move forward with that level of, I'm not ready to apply for a loan right now, some of the best advice I could give would be, it would harken back to establish a banking or credit union relationship. We've already talked about the upsides to doing that. Secondly, I would, be talking very heavily with the efactory. They can play a huge role in helping get you ready for that. Help you maybe get your reporting organized. Keeping detailed records is going to be huge. Maybe talk to people in your industry, find out who they're using for a CPA. If you're ready to start talking to a CPA, have a thoughtful plan and do your best to execute that plan. You may have to adjust it. Most plans you do. We have to do that plenty at the bank, and be ready for that. And then the other thing is if possible, if you are thinking you're going to need a loan in the near future, if you can, be very thoughtful with any personal debt you take on. We have had some occasions where an individual is required taken on a very large amount of personal debt just prior to applying for a commercial loan, and it does make it a little more challenging to be able to get that loan closed.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you for the mention of the efactory in our services. I was going to say, when you were talking about those financial statements and everything else that banks are often going to want to take a look at, those are things that our team here at the efactory and the Missouri Small Business Development Center at Missouri State can assist entrepreneurs with. And so don't ever hesitate to reach out to us to learn more about those services and ways that we might be able to help you get ready to go have a conversation with a lender. I do want to say really quickly, I'm getting ready to move into my last question. And so if you as an attendee have any questions, make sure that you're dropping those in the chat feature for us. So it can be really intimidating. I think I'm probably not the only one who's going to say this. It can be intimidating to try to keep up with all of the latest financial information and what the rates are and what the hot new thing is and the new products, whether it's for personal banking or business banking. So we know bankers always have the best information, as you all have proven today in our conversation, and you know things that the rest of us probably need to be thinking about. And so I'd like to offer each of you an opportunity, and we'll go in the same order. So we'll start with Christine, and then we'll go to Mark, and then we'll finish with Kent. But if each of you, and this can be personal banking advice, business banking advice, stuff that you're thinking about that you think others might want to also spend some time thinking about or evaluating for themselves. Just wanted to give you a chance to share those expert insights, because we know you all have them and you know lots of things that I don't know. So we'll go ahead and start with Christine.
Yeah, I've got a couple. The first one has to do with communication. Both Mark and Kent talked about the importance of a personal relationship, with your banker. I think it extends beyond just your banker to your vendors or the other people you do business with. But from my perspective, it's really important, that we know how to reach you, who the decision makers are for your business, especially in these strange times of COVID, where sometimes our customers aren't in their normal location. They're not at their office. We can't reach them at the normal phone number, and I think just taking a few minutes to reach out to your banker that knows you well to make sure they have, updated contact information, that they have your cell phone number or something like that, really goes a long way in helping us help you with a lot of the topics we've talked about today. Fraud being one of them. Mark talked about business email compromise and, fraudulent payments. And a lot of times the way that, we intercede on those is we just pick up the phone and call our customer, and say, hey, we've got this payment request and it's not usual for you, or we got this email request and we want to make sure it's you on the other side. And making sure that you have that information on file with your bank, but also that you have it on file for your vendors. So if you get an email from a vendor that says, hey, my wiring instructions have changed, you know who to call. You're not just using the phone number in that email, but you have a good, established phone number and a person that you work with that you can, you can work with on that to make sure it's legitimate and make sure you're not sending your hard-earned money out to somebody who is working hard on defrauding you. So the other tip that I have is related to emergency preparedness and emergency funds. Bankers spend a lot of time doing pandemic planning, and preparing kind of for the worst case scenario, which, this year we've been able to implement for our customers. But I think a lot of businesses don't, think through that until they're actually in a mode where they have to put something in place, so making plans for your business, whether that's kind of what Kent talked about, how you'll adjust, if your doors close, how do you keep doing business, or what adjustments can you make to be profitable? But also, on the topic of emergency funds, I think a lot of us as individuals and a lot of businesses don't, use those ebbs and flows to pad an emergency fund when we're making more money, so that we can be prepared for those kind of dry times or those times where income isn't the same. We've seen a lot of businesses that actually are more profitable right now during COVID because they've made those adjustments and they've had a plan in place, on how they can use the current environment to their advantage and make sure that they're still being profitable. And it's just important to think through, how you'll take those high times and, put money aside so that if you need a loan later, you have a cash reserve, when you go to the bank and you've got that history built up. So those would be my two tips: is make sure your bank knows how to reach you and make sure that you're thinking about emergency planning and emergency funds.
Yes, always good to have a rainy day fund, or like you said, maybe a dry day fund when things are not quite as prosperous. Mark, what about you?
Yeah, I'd really like to reinforce both Kent and Christine's earlier comments about having a strong relationship with your financial institution. This isn't just something that's self-serving. It's very important. We really view our business customers and our consumer customers as having a partnership, and it's one that we hope will be mutually, and we strive to make mutually beneficial. we like to be viewed as a resource that you can reach out to us, ask questions. We also try to be proactive. I know specifically in the fraud arena, we provide things such as annually we send out an online business security mailer for all of our business customers. We recently had an email campaign to our senior citizens to warn of fraud and to discuss red flags. Also, pre-COVID, we would do a lot of community outreach. We would go out to assisted care living facilities and do in-person presentations just to equip our customers, and not just our customers, with red flags associated with their demographic that fraudsters seem to target. We have had a fraud fighting Friday. I couldn't even get that out the first time.
That's a tongue twister.
It is, I know. But on social media, that we ask, I mean, not just our customers, but all businesses to follow, just to provide red flags and tips and topics to protect yourself and your business. And also beginning this week, later this week on Thursday, we're participating in the American Banking Association's National Anti-Phishing Campaign, #BanksNeverAskThat. And it's intended to turn bank customers into expert scam spotters. And we'll be posting tips and info on social media. As far as just any additional thoughts, some of the things that are being covered already, just separate your personal banking from your business accounts. Don't commingle funds. Make sure you maintain accurate records. That's going to be a great help for you and your accountant when it comes to tax time. Monitor transaction activity daily. Immediately notify your bank of any unauthorized activity. And this is probably going to be the most low-tech suggestion that you'll hear today. Please, 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 when you're mailing out bills, don't take them out to an unsecured mailbox. Put them in the mailbox and raise the red flag. Fraudsters they literally will descend upon a specific area. They travel from city to city, but they'll descend upon, and this is for your personal information as well too, not just your business. They'll go to residential areas, they'll go to office parks, they'll look for mailboxes in which people are mailing out checks to pay bills. They'll steal the mail. They'll go ahead and take the checks. They'll either go ahead and alter the checks or wash the checks, or they'll go ahead and capture your account number, and they'll use that to issue counterfeit checks. So please do not mail out mail like that. And if you're receiving mail, I would suggest converting to a secure receptacle. As far as outbound letters that you're sending with payments, I would strongly suggest dropping those off at the post office or at a secured USPS post office box receptacle.
Yeah, great points. Those are things that I wouldn't have thought of, and I am guilty of, dropping the occasional check probably in an unsecured mailbox. So I'll make sure I don't do that again. Kent, what would you share with us today?
Sure. Of course, we get asked a lot, what do you see happening with interest rates? And no one knows obviously 100% for sure, but the Fed changed their stance, and the Fed announced a few weeks ago that they're willing to tolerate higher than 2% inflation. Inflation's been below that for quite some time. And so they've established that more as an average number, not as okay, let's respond immediately if it hits, 2.1%. So that being said, the expectations are inflation won't hit 2% until the end of 2023. So honestly, the industry appears to believe that there's not going to be any rate hikes expected until 2024, and it's probably evenly divided. I would say probably it's beginning. The trend seems to be that most rate hikes won't happen until 2025. So I do think we're going to be in a low interest rate environment for the foreseeable future. As far as rates go. And then as far as just kind of some ongoing advice, what I would suggest is kind of doing what Great Southern's doing, and what everybody is attempting to do to be successful during these challenging times. And that would be to always be looking for challenges and opportunities. There's opportunities out there right now to supply a good or service that's undersupplied right now. And there's challenges out there too. And there's ways to deliver your existing product in different, perhaps there's ways to deliver your product that you've got right now in a different fashion. So, to being flexible is going to be huge. And when you do talk to your bank or credit union, be ready to talk about your business and your personal finances. If there's something you think is important and your lender has not asked you about it, volunteer it. I mean, for me, there's nothing better than getting to learn about somebody's business and how they do it and how they got into it. What challenges and opportunities are they seeing? And then, to me, one of the biggest compliments I get is when a longtime business customer calls and says, "Hey, Kent, I want your advice on something." And so that's kind of the role that I think is going to become ever more important during the pandemic and some of the volatility that it has introduced.
Great. Okay, well, thank you all so much. I have a couple of things that I'm going to wrap up with, but we do have a question from Seth in the chat. And so you may see this if you've opened this, but he's asking, as Great Southern navigates the pandemic, how has it altered any long-term strategies or plans that you had in place? And what other important decisions or issues do banks face that could drastically alter the next 10 to 20 years in the industry? And so I'll open this up to all three of you. Good question, Seth.
I can chime in with a couple of things on that. I know for us, we're looking at a lot more robotic process automation, artificial intelligence type of things, to run some of those processes that are done manually right now. As you go through pandemic planning and you look at, what happens if 50% or more of your staff gets COVID, and has to be home in quarantine, that's something that we have to think about and we have to plan for. So I think that, developing some of those robotic processes and, AI type of stuff is really helpful, but also transitioning associates to understand how those technologies work, so that as certain duties that they take care of are automated, they can transition into those roles where now they're the expert on how the AI works and how to fix it if it breaks. But the remote access side too, is something that's continually developed and something that, we've even implemented probably more wide scale than we ever thought we would with the COVID pandemic, is getting more associates to where they're working remote, or we're working in like DR type of facilities so that we can maintain that social distancing. So I would say those are probably the biggest impacts that I've seen, at least in my area. And then also understanding how our third parties respond in a pandemic environment, has really been top of mind for us as we look ahead to different strategic plans that we have and different, relationships that we're building with vendors to offer new services, making sure that those continue to be stable in the long term if we see a repeat of this.
Yeah,
I agree. I'll just tag team on what Christine said already. It's given us the ability to go ahead and test out disaster recovery procedures in a live environment. I think we would have all preferred not to have done that, but it's been very helpful from that aspect. We've put an emphasis on trying to make sure that we're taking care of our associates, trying to make sure that we're segregating important business functions as far as the individuals that staff those individual departments, shifting our associates out to multiple locations. So if one individual in a particular department was to become COVID positive, it wouldn't spread and take that entire function down and make us unable to service and assist our customers. I do think, though, that banking will continue to be, as it always has been, a relationship business. And the basics for banking will not change. But as Christine said, we're always looking for access channels and better ways to go ahead and service our customers and ways to allow our customers access to account information, access to their accounts. And this has just really helped to reinforce that approach, and we'll continue to look for different channels to be able to assist our customers and allow them access to the bank.
Yeah, great. Kent, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm not, as Paige can attest, probably the most tech forward guy on the call. But, I would say just on one level, a few years ago, we invested in a very good loan processing software. And one of the features of it is that, you can send your customer a secure portal and they can upload all their financial documents to it, and it's very slick and very good. Well, pre-pandemic, I didn't utilize that very much. I wanted to come by your office. I wanted to talk about your latest project, all those types of things, and I wanted to pick that up or get a thumb drive from you that had that on there. obviously the secure portal thing has become a lot more important, and even us slow adopters are starting to utilize that. Just as far as to circle back to some of the different delivery methods that Mark was alluding to, some other things that we've gotten better at is getting a lot of people on our lending staff set up to work remotely. And so everyone has the capability of working remotely, but the challenge now is how do we find metrics that say this is how effective an individual is working remotely? The scorecard that we used 8 months ago to measure success isn't the scorecard we should be using right now to measure success. And on a go forward basis, it's probably going to be a hybrid view of that between the two to judge ongoing, job performance, to be honest with you. And then as far as the lending environment goes, again, loans are going to continue to be made available. There's going to be obviously more technology used to get financials in and actually close loans. And I do think that there's going to be a somewhat, banks may have been more, and credit unions may have been more willing to take some chances on certain industry types that I think they're going to be a little bit more conservative about. And instead of saying, well, this person's always been able to sell a ton of widgets, they should be able to sell a ton of widgets now, let's do this loan. It's going to be, can this person handle, a potential shock, and what does that look like? So I do think there's going to be some industries that are going to be, it'll be a little bit more challenging to get loans in those industries for the next several years.
Okay, great. Thank you all so much. You were totally prepared for that question, so we appreciate it. All right, so I mentioned that I had a couple of things as we wrapped up. The first is that our Lunch and Learns are always hosted in partnership with the Missouri Small Business Development Center here at Missouri State University. And you heard me mention them earlier when I was chatting about our one-on-one consulting services that are available to entrepreneurs and working with financial projections and helping you prepare to potentially meet with a lender, and all of those sorts of things. And so because of our funding, we would really appreciate it if you would take the survey today. You can actually hold your cell phone up and scan that QR code. It'll open on your smartphone. Really short survey, multiple choice. And so it's a huge help to us to be able to report back on everyone who was here today and who participated in the program. I'll leave that up there for just another second, that it will allow you to scan that and get that open. And then the next thing that I wanted to share with you is an upcoming event that I think you'll be really interested in. We're super excited to host our 2020 pitch contest presented by RMI. This is going to be hosted on November 18th at noon. So kind of like the same time, same place as today. It's a virtual event held over the lunch hour during Global Entrepreneurship Week. And there is a $10,000 cash prize. So you can sign up to watch startups and local companies deliver their best pitch. They will deliver a 5-minute pitch, and they'll do some Q&A with our judging panel, and you'll be able to watch all of that, and they will briefly deliberate, and then you'll be able to see the winner announced, and that winning company is going to receive a $10,000 cash prize in addition to some in-kind services from our supporting sponsors. And so we're really looking forward to this event. We're always excited about Global Entrepreneurship Week. It's that week before Thanksgiving. And so you can sign up to be part of that at efactory.missouristate.edu/pitch. There's of course no cost to attend, and we hope that you'll join us then. Thank you so much to Christine, Kent, and Mark for taking the time today and sharing your insights and your expertise. I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to do this and to connect. And of course, we're so thankful for Great Southern's ongoing partnership with the efactory and your commitment to supporting entrepreneurs and small business owners in Southwest Missouri. And so without that, we'll go ahead and close this out, and thank you all for being with us. See you later.